When Journey to Ungoro releases, that is going to cause the three sets from 2015 to rotate out. That's Blackrock Mountain, the Grand Tournament, and League of Explorers. How impactful is that rotation going to be? What cards are going to rotate out? How is that going to impact decks? Let's find out. Druids don't lose much from Blackrock Mountain. From the Grand Tournament, they're going to lose Living Roots. Darnassus Aspirant finally got figured out to be a 2-3 with Taunt against aggressive decks, which ended up not being that good. Druid the Saber was a good beast card that usually played as 2-mana, 3-2 stealth. Mulch was a removal card that they played. Astral Communion was a fun card. Savage Combatant, a good beast card. Wild Walker, Beast Synergy, even though it never got played. Knight of the Wild. Aviana, part of the very cool Aviana Kun combo. So generally Druids get hit by the Living Roots and the Mulch and the Aviana. Some beast hits from the Druid of Saber and the Savage Combatant. League of Explorers, they lose Raven Idol, which they lost. They used every so often. Mound Raptor is lost from Beast as well. Beast Druid loses quite a lot. Hunter loses Quick Shot. Quick Shot was a really big card in pretty much every deck. Bear Trap was a cool trap. King's Alec, good beast. Walk and Load used to be a interesting archetype, but never really took off. Dreadscale, cool control. Legendary, wasn't that popular. Power Shot, a cool control card as well. And I never crashed Acid Maul because it sucks. Not much here. Desert Camel is actually in some mid-range Hunter before though. So Hunter doesn't lose that much. They're only losing basically Quick Shot as the card that was run a lot. Which is good news for them because Ungoro might give them a bunch of powerful beasts with all those dinosaurs. Mage losing Flame Waker, very key card in Tempo Mage. Arcane Blast, a key card in Tempo Mage as well as a one-of in Reno Mage. By the way, Reno Mage, well, Reno Decks, I guess I'll spoil it ahead of time, are losing Reno. That's kind of a big deal. They're also losing Bran. But we'll get to that in time. Flame Lance, a one-of in the Reno Decks. Ronin, big control card, but ended up being too slow. Forgotten Torch, a one-of in Reno Decks. Occasionally run in Freeze Mage and Tempo Mage. Ethereal Conjurer, occasionally run in Reno Mage. Say they lose a few tools here and there, but I think Tempo Mage should be able to come back from that. Flame Waker, the biggest hit, and Arcane Blast. And when I say they should come back from that, I mean if they get other cards. It's going to be very tough for them to recover from Flame Waker. It is a very key card. The deck archetype, I guess I should say, will not exist if they don't get something else. What are Paladins losing? Solemn Vigil, a nice control card. Usually played in the combo decks in combination with Equality and Pyromancer. Dragon Consort, Dragon Paladin never took off, and the entire Blackrock Mountain set is getting rotated out, which was the primary source of dragons. Dragon decks in general are not going to do well. From the Grand Tournament, they lose Argent Lance, which is a card that wasn't that great, but still saw some play as early game anti-aggro. And also Paladin didn't actually see much play in Standard. Pretty much the one variant of Paladin. Mysterious Challenger finally gets rotated out. The reason why Mysterious Challenger didn't need the nerf is because Avenge got removed from Standard. So Mysterious Challenger became a lot less good. I was like a little bit surprised to see this. Like, didn't it rotate out? Why isn't that why it's gone? No, it's because Avenge got rotated out, as well as Shielded Minibot, Muster from Battle way back. So yeah, none of these cards are actually usually played. This was played in some mid-range Paladin. Mid-range Paladin got removed way back with Shielded Minibot and Muster though. And League of Explorer, they lose a very good like generalist card, Keeper of Oldemon. And Anyfin can happen. The removal of that will remove the Anyfin combo deck. So goodbye to that. Murloc Knight did see a little bit of play in mid-range Paladin. Ultimately replaced with other better cards. Or I should say, it kind of lost favor when old Murkai rotated out a little bit and Murloc Tinyfin got rotated in. It made the random Murloc a lot less good. Priest losing Twilight Whelp, a huge hit to the Dragon Priest, but that's not all. We'll wait on that for the neutrals for more. Wormrust Agent, a huge hit to the Dragon Priest. They lose their 1-drop and their 2-drop. Confessor Paletress, a card occasionally played in Control Priest. Museum Curator, a really nice card that discovered cards and was a 2-drop. Excavated Evil, an excellent Control Priest card. And Tomb, an excellent really late game card. Recently cut because decks are too aggressive to play in Tomb. People moved to Shadow Word Death, but had its moment in the limelight. Priests are losing everything at the moment, so we'll have to hope that they get something. They lose their dragon stuff, they lose their control stuff. We'll see if the next expansion brings them some good stuff. Rogue is losing Dark Iron Skulker, a nice control card, which didn't end up being too popular. Gang Up, for the popular Gang Up Patches decks, or even just mill decks. Blizzard is humoring the idea of replacing Conceal, the common slot that was removed, with Gang Up. I think that would be a pretty good idea. From the Grand Tournament, they lose Buccaneer, a card occasionally played in aggressive Rogue decks. Beneath the Grounds, card that's teched in against Reno Decks. Amusingly, actually. Poisoned Blade, the card that was so powerful that they had to nerf Blade Flurry. No, this card is just terrible. The new Barak, cool card, never took off. Because you couldn't survive as a control rogue due to no taunt, no heal, no draw, etc. Well, they had draw. No taunt, no heal, no AoE. Tomb Pillager, a critical card in Miracle Rogue, because it turns out that a 4-mana 5/4 which draws a card is extremely good. And not just draws a card, it's a coin, which is better than a card because it goes into the gul'dan auctioneer and gives you a mana. Unearthed Raptor, a really good card, meant to be played with Jade Swarmer, possibly a Jade deck could form. Had some fun with N'Zoth. Tomb Pillager, the biggest loss of Rogue. Maybe the Aggro Rogue variant is still going to stick around though. In fact, Aggro Rogue doesn't lose that much. Shaman loses Fireguard Destroyer, replaced with Flame Reefed Faceless. Lava Shock, a cool card that comboed with Elemental Destruction. Elemental Destruction, a card that will no longer be there, but is replaced with Volcano. They lose Totem Golem, which is big, as well as their friend the Tunnel Trog. Shaman's actually losing a bit. However, the Jade Shaman decks can survive without Tunnel Trog and Totem Golem. Before we say the age of Shaman is over, and mid-range Shaman used Thunder Bluff Valiant a lot, but that's no longer used because Jade mid Shaman was took its place. Healing Wave, an excellent healing card, but Genu Water Speaker is here. Turns out mid Jade Shaman does not actually lose that much. Warlock loses Imp Gang Boss, a critical card for Zoo, and a very good card in general. One of in Reno Lock, Demon Wrath, a very good anti-AoE card. A very good AoE card, which didn't hit your own demons, but was usually just dealt as 2 damage to all. The Grand Tournament was kind of the grand suck for Warlocks. I don't think they lost anything from here. Dreadsteed was cool. There was actually, at a point, a Reno Dreadsteed deck. That was when the meta was really slow. It actually did pretty well for a little bit. It was like a card that was played 2 of. In League of Explorers, they lose Dark Peddler, which was a key Zoo card, and a just good card in general. Curse of Ratham, a very cool tech card that got around Ice Block. Turned out to see a tiny bit of play after all. But fortunately, not in time for me to still win the bet against Amaz, since Curse of Ratham was not played in 2016. Warrior loses Revenge, a card that was much better than I had thought. Control Warrior ended up running 2 of them because the potential to deal 3 damage for 2 to everything turned out to be good enough, and 1 damage to all minions. It was more expensive than Whirlwind, but that was a fine price. Axe Flinger, overshadowed by Grim Patron, never actually took off. From the Grand Tournament, this bash card seen in Aggro Warrior sometimes, but not always. Control Warrior all the time. Alex Strauss' Champion, a very fearsome card, rivaling Fire War Accent's play, one of the reasons why you ran Dragon Warrior. Varian Ren saw some amount of play in Tempo Warrior, actually. Shocking that a 10 mana card actually saw play, and not in the Control Warrior that people thought it would be insane in. League of Explorers, they lose Fierce Monkey, which was a excellent card in Curator Dragon Warrior. 3 mana, 3/4 taunt, just good enough. Obsidian Destroyer, not much of impact, but big arena card. So Warriors are not actually losing that much, other than the Dragon package in Champion, as well as the various other dragons from Blackrock Mountain. And now into the neutral parts. Those class cards tell a story, but the neutral cards do also affect a lot of decks. First of all, with Blackrock Mountain, the loss of Blackwing Corruptor is very, very big for dragon decks. This was the reason why you ran dragon decks, actually, most of the time, because that card was such a high amount of value. Grim Patron had a fun time. It didn't even die after Warsong Commander died, but the meta got too fast for it, and there were too many AoEs. Drachnid Crusher, a card that actually saw play in Dragon Warrior. A lot of play. Blackwing Technician, seen in some Dragon Priests as a decent 3 of. Even with Cabal Talon Priest, Blackwing Technician still good. And probably the most impactful rotation, Emperor Thaurissan. No longer are you going to be able to lower all of your cards, so one turn combos happen between Faceless plus Power Overwhelming plus Leroy. Although Power Overwhelming is actually getting rotated out. No more Iceland shenanigans, although Iceland is getting rotated into the Hall of Fame. Just general value from Emperor Thaurissan as well in the control decks. Surprisingly, Emperor Thaurissan seeing less and less play by default anyway, so this rotation is not going to be that big of a deal. Major Domo was fun. Nefarian saw a little bit of play in Control Warrior as the late game card. Occasional play in Dragon Priest. Grand Tournament, ragged on for not having very strong cards. Flame Juggler saw some play in Zoo. It has fallen out of favor as stronger cards were printed. Argent Horse Rider saw a decent amount of play in aggressive decks. Since it had to be removed twice, it was like too annoying to remove, and it would usually get in for 4 damage, which is a good amount for 3. It usually got in for 6 damage because it could hit face twice, and then minions would trade into it. Possibly 2 minions traded into it. Ended up being quite strong. The Sisters never ended up seeing play, even though there were 3 mana 3/4s with bonuses, showing that a 3 mana 3/4 needs a rather significant upside to be played. No, it's my card that I revealed, Silent Knight. Didn't actually see any play. Refreshment Vendor, a nice anti-aggro card. So good that it actually saw play in Handlock. Rip Handlock after Molten Giants got nerfed though. Twilight Guardian, a very critical card, and that rotation out is going to kill the dragon decks, along with all the other dragon cards getting rotated out. Just a card, True Heart. We had a fun amount of time with replacing our Armor Up with Tank Up. That ended up being the final hero power that was usually played. However, Paladins enjoyed Just a Card, True Heart for some time too, when the mid-range Paladin worked. This was a very cool card. Even saw play in Priest. Control Priest. Healing for 4 was nice. Those 3 classes primarily. I didn't talk about Gormok. Gormok actually saw some play in Zoo. With all the things that spawn, and then playing the Gormok. Actually saw play. I'll touch on Coda Rider a tiny bit. Saw some amount of play as a win condition in Control Warrior in the late game, due to the sheer amount of power that it could spawn. Chill Maul, a card that saw some play in Dragon Priest. And from League of Explorers, we actually have very impactful amounts of neutrals getting removed. Sir Finlay used in Aggro Shaman, Aggro Warrior to replace their hero power with a more aggressive hero power. Usually Life Tap or Steady Shot. That loss will actually affect Pirate Warrior. Bran Bronzebeard played in Jade decks, played in Kazakus decks, played in Dragon decks. This little guy was so powerful you had to remove him. You could play him and immediately get value. Reno decks will lose a lot of value from Bran. Jade decks will lose some value. They'll be a bit sad, but the Jade stuff by itself will be good. Elise Starseeker, a very key card in making sure that control decks that ended up playing all their cards and running out of a deck would eventually be able to transform their useless cards into legendaries. That was in Priest, that was in Warrior of Control. Jinny of Zephyr is a cool card that managed to make it to the competitive scene to some extent, thanks to Potion of Madness's interaction giving Jinny of Zephyr's charge. Oh yes, Elise Starseeker, by the way, will be coming back in Un'Goro, however not in this form. It will not be a reprint, it will not be a 4-mana 3/5 that shuffles the Match the Golden Monkey into your deck, but we will see another copy of Elise in Un'Goro. She'll be in a completely different role, possibly as a tour guide, Elise, tour guide, Elise, protector of children, who knows. Reno Jackson, this card spawned multiple decks. Like, there used to be the standard deck, and then you would also have a Reno variant sometimes. You could have Reno Paladin, Reno Rogue, Reno Druid, Reno Warlock, Reno Mage, Reno blah blah blah. Like, this card kills 9 decks, basically. 9 possible decks. But it's good that it gets removed. It may get more support in the future, but I hope that you don't. I hope it doesn't get support in the first set on Guro, because I think one season, which is a period of 4 months, without a Reno effect would be fun, just to skip it. Eventually, in Standard, it ended up being you had to have Reno in your control deck because you had to have Kazakis because you got so much value with it and it was just wrong not to play it. So Reno decks like overtook traditionally good control decks. It'll be good to be playing with 2 copies of cards again in control decks. Archthief Rafam, everyone says all 4 explorers saw play, but hey, this guy, he saw some play too as the control win the game card in some decks. Alright, so going from most popular standard decks to least popular, we're going to explore how these sets rotating out will affect those decks. Starting with Pirate Warrior. Pirate Warrior loses Sir Finley Murgleton. Some versions of Pirate Warrior were running Bash, but Bash can easily be replaced with other cards. Good news, if you're a Pirate Warrior player, you're going to be able to continue hitting the face. So this is actually very concerning, and I wanted to start off with this concerning note. It would be pretty bad for the game if Standard rotated out 3 sets and the most powerful decks of Standard right now continue to be the most powerful decks. Why is that bad? One, it means that the rotation didn't really do much because most popular decks continue to be the most popular decks. We continue to get oppressed by aggro decks that just keep hitting in the face. People didn't really enjoy that. Yes, they got hit a little bit with Small Time Buccaneer, but maybe they should get hit a little bit more. And as a spoiler, the Jade decks are the very popular decks right now too. If those decks are still around, and if it's still like Pirates versus Jades after Un'Goro, is that going to be good? Well, hopefully we get a lot of tools from Un'Goro. That's going to be a major thing. The Pirate Warrior win rate is already so high, and if we rotated out so many tools from other decks, how is the Pirate Warrior not going to just do even better? So I begin with a very concerning note. It appears that Pirate Warrior, a very popular deck, is not losing much. Jade Druid loses a little bit of stuff. They lose Living Roots. That was a 2 of. And they lose Mulch. Usually a 1 or 2 of. They lose Bran, which arguably isn't that big a loss. They lose Azure Drake, which is a big loss. So they're going to need something to keep up the card draw. Card draw, one of the things that Jade Druids really needed at the end. Bran Bronzebeard, more of a loss in the next deck in popularity, Jade Shaman. Why is it more of an impact in Jade Shaman and less of an impact in Jade Druid? It's because Jade Shaman has cheaper cards to trigger the Bran Bronzebeard with. They have a 2-drop that has a Battle Cry, which summons a Jade in Jade Claws. Jade Shaman loses technically a decent amount. They lose their early game of Tunnel Trog and Totem Golem. They also lose Healing Wave if they were aiming against aggro. And they lose Azure Drake. which was just a nice general draw card. But all control decks are losing Azure Drake, so they're all going to go down by about the same. And perhaps the good news of decks losing Azure Drake is Azure Drake is just a card that's good against mid-range and control. So if all mid-range and control decks lose Azure Drake, that actually makes them generally better against aggro. So that's an interesting thing, an interesting interaction that happens out. So Jade Shaman's biggest losses end up being Totem Golem and... Well, no, I'm not even going to say it's going to be Totem Golem and Tunnel Trog. They're going to replace Totem Golem and Tunnel Trog with a more control-oriented option, such as Volcano, the only card we really know that's a control option from the next set, or perhaps more realistically and more relevantly from now, they're just going to replace it with Devolve. Devolve, Feral Spirit, those cards can replace. They already have Jinyu Water Speaker, so Healing Wave was not really required. So you just need to get a few pickups here and there from Un'Goro. So far, all three of those decks look like they're going to... Not only are they the most popular decks right now, they look like they're going to survive into Standard. Now we're going to move into the next most popular deck, according to people who play these at a higher rank. Reno Lock. A lot of people have continued to ask me the same question. Are Reno decks going to survive when Reno rotates out? And my answer remains the same. They might survive if there's a card printed that is similar to Reno in the sense that if your deck has no duplicates, do something amazing. If decks don't get that, they're not going to survive with the loss of Reno Jackson and with the loss of Bran Bronzebeard, and across Reno Lock with the loss of various one-ofs such as Dark Peddler, Demon Wrath, Imp Gang Boss, Emperor Thorsan, Refreshment Vendor, but again, most importantly, Reno Jackson and Bran Bronzebeard, since you can no longer get a second copy with Kazakus, Reno Lock is not going to be in a good spot. I predict that there won't be a duplicate beneficial card in the new set because it just makes so much sense to have Reno phase out for a little bit and come back later in the year. So Reno Lock is basically dead. Maybe a Control Warlock will take its place. Zoo looks like it might still be around. We'll get to Zoo later, though. Next on the list is Dragon Priest. How is Dragon Priest gonna do? I've already spoiled that it won't do too well, but between losing Blackwing Corruptor, Twilight Whelp, and Wormrest Agent, Twilight Guardian, four very key cards, and all two ofs in Dragon Priest, they're not going to have a good time. They also lose Bran Bronzebeard. They also lose Azure Drake. However, it is worth mentioning that with the removal of a lot of dragons, Nether Spite Historian is still in there, and Draconid Operative is still in there. So this traditional Dragon Priest is obviously going to be gone. But when you look into how many dragons are left in Standard afterwards, Fairy Dragon 1, Midnight Drake 2, Twilight Drake 3, Bookworm 4, Skilled Nightmare 5, Alexstrasza 6, Nozdormu 7, Onyxia 8, Ysera 9, Deathwing 10, Deathwing 11. There's not a lot of dragons left, and that actually makes Nether Spite Historian a lot better, because the only priest dragon card is going to be Draconid Operative. Oh, I missed Malagos as well. So 12 dragons. It is going to be tough to activate your Draconid Operative. However, and it's going to be a little bit tougher to do Nether Spite Historian. However, if you do play Nether Spite Historian, with so many fewer dragons out there, the chances of getting Draconid Operative are way higher. And you're almost always going to get a big dragon. You'll get Ysera a lot more often, you'll get Deathwing, you'll get the other Deathwing. So if there are viable dragon cards printed in Un'Goro, which it doesn't seem like there will be, because how can you fit those in between elementals and beasts? I think it's fair to say that Dragon Priest is on a hiatus. Next on the list is Reno Mage. Reno Mage loses Emperor Thorsan, And similar to Priest, the big things that they lose, I'll just look at that. The most impactful things off the bat: brand Bronzebeard, no longer can they brand Kazakis. They can't even brand Kazakis Manic Soulcaster for the potential to get 4. They lose Reno Jackson. I could go on, but they lose Forgotten Torch, they lose Ethereal Conjurer, which is run sometimes, they lose Arcane Blast. All in all, the biggest loss is Reno, the big man himself. It doesn't seem like there's going to be much of a reason to play Reno Mage. There's still Kazakis, but I don't think that itself is enough by himself to carry the Reno theme. Possibly there will be a Control Mage out there, though. Grinder Mages have existed in the past. But Reno Mage, as you know it, will probably disappear. Next most popular on the list is Miracle Rogue. Miracle Rogue actually doesn't lose that much, with the notable exception of Tomb Pillager, one of the best cards in Miracle Rogue. And also Azure Drake, which was one of the ways that they got card draw and were able to cycle into the Auctioneer. When I say they don't lose that much, I guess I should say in terms of cards, they don't lose that much. However, in terms of card quality, losing Azure Drake, probably for the best in Rogue, because they had Preparation Fan Knives, they had Backstab, they had Eviscerate, so many spells. They were actually one of the classes that took advantage of Azure Drake's spell damage the most. And Tomb Pillager was the card that let them be aggressive. Oh, and Conceal. Conceal is a big one. Miracle Rogue, as you know it, is going to probably get out of there. Emperor Thorsan is lost in case you wanted to play the Malagus version as well. So that's pretty tough. Reno Priest, similar to Reno Mage and Reno Warlock, they're losing Reno. Unlike Reno Warlock, which doesn't have the Cruel, and unlike Reno Mage, where, yeah, Solia is nice, but meh. Raza is actually pretty good. Raza the Chained has the potential to carry Reno even without Reno. And also in Priest, he didn't need the heal as much. Maybe a Reno without Reno, Priest still survives. However, I used to build the Reno Priest deck around the Dragon package. I guess you could replace the Dragon package with something else. Reno Priest will need a serious retooling, but possibly could survive. Next up, a very new deck, Water Rogue. Water Rogue uses Finja, and by the way, Finja and the Finja package, which is Murloc, Finja, Murloc Warleader, as well as Bluegill Warrior. Expect to see this package run in quite a few decks. Popularized when Small Time Buccaneer got nerfed and people had to look for other ways to do insane stuff. Turns out that Bluegill Warrior, Murloc Warleader, and Finja, they're all staying. The Aggro Rogue deck actually doesn't lose that much and will still be around. It activates patches with the Swashbucklers and South Sea Deckhands, which are still standard. And what it does lose is Argent Horse Rider, sometimes Run. It loses Azure Drake. Occasionally, Dark Iron Skulker actually made it into that deck from Blackrock Mountain. But with some retooling around and perhaps being more aggressive, you could see Water Rogue still be good. Next most popular on the list is Zoo. Good old Zoo. Zoo makes a slight comeback due to Small Time Buccaneer getting nerfed. They're getting hit hard with Imp Gang Boss's removal. They're losing Power Overwhelming, which was a very beneficial card for them. And they're losing Dark Peddler. And they're also losing the ability for Dark Peddler to discover Power Overwhelming, which is nice, but it doesn't really matter that much. They still have the Silverware Golem alongside with the Malkazar's Imp for this discard theme. They still have Darkshire Librarian. So Zoo will probably survive. There will probably be other efficient cards. Imp Gang Boss and Dark Peddler is a loss, but they could find stuff to replace it. And Power Overwhelming is a big loss, but perhaps they'll find something to replace that as well. Zoo's gone through a lot. People say it always works, and that's true as long as there's cheap cards and there's life tap, there will be Zoo. It just got overshadowed by Small Time Buccaneer for a while, but Small Time Buccaneer got nerfed. Zoo is actually a valid deck right now, and it should continue to be a valid deck in the future. Next up, Dragon Warrior loses quite a lot in terms of neutrals. They lose Draconid Crusher, they lose Blackwing Corruptor, the reason to actually run Dragon Warrior. I don't really have to go on from here. Dragon Warrior will get replaced by Pirate Warrior. Or perhaps Elemental Warrior, or Beast Warrior, whatever happens to be Unguro's next thing. And they lose the big one. They lose Alexstrasza's Champion. With Alexstrasza's Champion, Blackwing Corruptor gone, there's no way you run Dragon Warrior. And I've mentioned this like 2 other times already, but Twilight Guardian, that's a good dragon, which they don't have anymore. And Dragon Warrior was kind of one of the reasons to run Dragon Warrior was actually Twilight Guardian as well, which protected your face against these mean old pirates. Tempo Mage, rising up in popularity, especially due to the nerf of Small Time Buccaneer and Spirit Quells. They lose Arcane Blast, which is a big deal. Early game, cheap spells combined with Sorcerer's Apprentice was huge for Arcane Blast. It was kind of their version of Backstab. Whoa. Thanks, Hearthstone, for letting me know that the global games are coming. I'm still salty about not getting invited. Anyways, let me say that again since I was interrupted. Tempo Mage loses Arcane Blast, which is a big deal for them because Sorcerer's Apprentice plus Arcane Blast was their version of a Tempo Backstab, which is a really good card. Perhaps more concerning than Arcane Blast, though, is they lose Flamewaker. Flamewaker, the card combined with all these cheap spells, which really allowed them to do insane things. They also lose Forgotten Torch, which is not in every single Tempo Mage deck, and that isn't too big a loss, but they lose that. And finally, they lose Azure Drake, which was a card they needed for the spell damage, actually, with the Arcane Blast, with the Arcane Missiles, with the spells in general, Frostbolt. Control Mage might still stick around, and Tempo Mage kind of changes to Control Mage every so often, since they run Firelands Portal and Flame Strike. They can still get a lot of card draw with Acolyte of Pain and with Arcane Intellect. They lose Flamewaker, which is the big one. The aggressive version of Tempo Mage will have to get a serious retooling. Honorable mentions, Malygos Druid decks lose Living Roots, and they lose Emperor Thaurissan, so that's going to kill it. In fact, most decks which ran Malygos as a win condition are going to get destroyed by the loss of Emperor Thaurissan. Emperor Thaurissan, a key way to actually play Malygos, and then play their multiple spells, be the Sinister Strike, Living Roots, or cheap spells in general, Moonfire, etc. You can still do Malygos, Moonfire, but that's doubtfully good enough. Aviana is rotating out, which means Kun Aviana combo decks are no longer there. Sad day. Freeze Mage is losing Ice Lance, which is huge. I don't think Freeze Mage will be around after the Ice Lance nerf, but they also lose Forgotten Torch. Also, importantly, they lose Emperor Thaurissan. Anyfin Paladin loses Anyfin, so that's gone. Control Warrior didn't absolutely need just a card True Heart in order to survive the late game. They did it before just a card True Heart was out just fine. They do lose Revenge, which is annoying, but not too bad. They lose Bash, which is annoying, but could be replaced. Possibly Control Warrior still is a thing. They'll need some cards, though. And they'll also need the meta to change, because if it's still Jadestone, Control Warrior is absolutely destroyed. Needless to say, the weird Ginny Priest combo deck with Potion of Madness is gone because Ginny is rotating out. Beast Druid loses a few things here and there, but Ngoro is expected to have a bunch of good beasts. Perhaps it's finally the time for Beast Druid. If Aggro Shaman wasn't already dead, they're losing Tunnel Trog and they're losing Totem Golem, so that's going to be a huge hit for them. In addition, of course, to their Small Time Buccaneer and their Spirit Claws nerfs. So praise Aggro Shaman, it's finally gone, but in its place, Aggro Warrior, Pirate Warrior are. It's worth mentioning that when those 3 sets, League of Explorers, Grand Tournament, and Blackrock Mountain rotated out, Whispers of the Old Gods are still there. And one of the major themes of Whispers of the Old Gods were the Old Gods. We haven't seen N'Zoth and Cthulhu in a while. So, Cthulhu, mainly a card that saw play with the set itself, with fewer options out there. Perhaps we'll see Cthulhu make a comeback. I personally don't think so, though, because a Cthulhu deck and a Jade deck are very similar in the sense that they're building up stuff. However, I think Cthulhu's buildup gets outclassed by the Jade buildup. So therefore, Jade does it better, so you should run Jade over Cthulhu. In terms of N'Zoth, it's almost kind of a similar thing. N'Zoth has a big payoff at the end, and with Amara revealed from the priest quest, that could work. However, again, I think that Jade might outclass it, and might outclass Control Priest in general. Control decks tend to have a problem with Jade decks. My concern is, with all this review of what decks are going to stay, what decks are going to go, and what has potential, it seems like Pirate Warriors and Jade Shaman and Jade Druid are three of the decks that aren't going to get hit very much by the rotation. I fear that those three decks are going to continue to be the dominant decks in New Standard. It's too early to say that that's going to happen because we haven't seen the new cards in the set. It's just an early fear, which I'm no doubt sure that Blizzard is aware of. Will something come up to be able to both deal with the late game dominance of Jade and the early game dominance of Pirate Warrior? Will there be a happy middle deck that smashes the Pirate Warrior enough? Like, we need decks that can deal with both the Jade and with the aggressive version of Pirate Warrior. I don't want there to just be better anti-aggro options, because anti-aggro options will just kill Pirate Warrior and then Jadestone will be everywhere. So we also need good anti-control options. And how do you deal with just very cheap minions in the late game? It's tough to find something that deals with that. But who knows? Maybe someone, maybe Ungirl will surprise me. Blizzard has probably learned the fear from the player base of having too strong of aggro decks. So what else is going to counter Jade decks? Will there be some kind of secret tech? Will the late game of questing be better than the Jade in the late game? What I fear is that Jades outweigh the quests. Like for Priest Death Rattles already, for example, Amara looks like there's a powerful effect, but my personal internal theory craft already is that a N'Zoth Priest Death Rattle deck is going to lose to Jadestone with the current tools available. Obviously, there's still like 130 cards to still be revealed, but I'm fearful. I also don't think that hand buffing is going to be a thing still, despite other sets rotating out, because Jade is a thing, and Jade seems like a stronger mechanic than hand buffing. So that's the fear. I'm looking forward to Ungoro and seeing what's going to come to offer some solutions against Jade. Off the top of my head, I don't really know what could be good other than like a blatant hate card, which is like set the opponent's Jade counter to 1 or something. Like reset your opponent's Jade counter. That would be quite a hate card right there. Combo decks can beat Jade. They're usually pretty slow to start. So possibly a combo deck gets around, and combo's weakness should be aggro. You could have a secret which does something terrible to the opponent if they have a card that has like above 9 attack or higher come up, like some very techie cards which aim against like ridiculously big minions. Those are all decent ideas. Something that counters battle cries as a secret, perhaps. Yeah. So my very inelegant like solutions. If there isn't a hard counter to Jade out there, since my desire is not to play another 4 months of Jadestone, if there's no like natural counter to Jade, which I would hope there is, and maybe the quests actually do better than Jade. In fact, that's one of the big things. How do you counter late game Jade? Have a even better late game thing. And quests are all built for the late game in theory. So suppose you get a quest reward that's so good that it's even better than Jade, but the problem with that is that deck becomes ridiculous. I don't think you can make a quest be that good in the late game. Like, you would have to say like almost win the game, but that's not very healthy either. I'd say the 3 cards to hit if Jade like remains super dominant would be Jade Idol, Jade Claws, and Aya Blackpaw. Just go ahead and nerf all those cards by 1. The deck might still work, and then just print a bunch of anti-aggro options. And then we'd have a happy little balance, perhaps. So anyways, that's just a theory. A Trump theory.